The gun pressed against the CEO's temple as Flight 447 banked sharply. At 30,000 feet, the cabin filled with screams and the hijackers' demands for $50 million. In seat 14C, everyone saw just another exhausted passenger in worn jeans and a faded jacket, a single dad flying budget class who looked like he hadn't slept in days. But what the hijackers didn't know was that Matthew Moore had spent a decade in Delta Force, executing impossible missions in the world's deadliest places. What happened next in that hijacked aircraft would transform two strangers' lives forever, binding them through courage, desperation, and a connection neither saw coming. Welcome to a story that proves heroes don't always announce themselves. Sometimes, they're just tired fathers trying to get home to their families while keeping everyone alive. Now, let's begin where it all started, with a man who just wanted to make it to his daughter's birthday and a billionaire who thought money could protect her from anything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The story begins in a cramped apartment in Portland, Oregon, at 4:47 a.m., when Matthew Moore's alarm shattered what little sleep he'd managed to catch. The studio apartment was barely large enough for two people, but it was home. Clothes hung on a rack in the corner because there wasn't a proper closet. The kitchenette consisted of a hot plate, a mini fridge, and a microwave that only worked when you held the door closed. The bathroom door didn't lock, and the heating system made sounds like someone was strangling a cat every morning at dawn. But none of that mattered when he looked at the sleeping form of his daughter, 11-year-old Riley, curled up on the pull-out couch they shared. Her dark hair spread across the pillow, her face peaceful in a way that made his chest tight. In 3 days, she'd turned 12. 3 days, and he'd promised her something special this year. Not just a cake from the grocery store or a gift he'd scraped together from overtime hours at the warehouse. Something real, something memorable. The problem was, memorable required money he didn't have. Matthew moved quietly through the apartment, performing his morning routine with the precision his years in Delta Force had ingrained. Coffee in the ancient pot, shower in the bathroom, where the water took 5 minutes to warm up. Dressed in his warehouse uniform, navy blue pants and a matching shirt with Moore stitched over the pocket. The uniform smelled like cardboard and hard work. It was honest employment, but it paid barely enough to keep them in this apartment with food on the table. His phone buzzed. A text from his supervisor at Pacific Distribution Center, where he worked night shifts loading trucks. Can you cover Jenkins today? 3 p.m. to midnight. Double time. Double time. That was almost $300. That was the birthday present Riley wanted. The art supply set she'd been staring at in the store window for months. The good one, with real canvas and oil paints, not the cheap watercolors he usually managed. But today was Wednesday. Riley's school concert was tonight at 6:30 p.m. She had a solo. She'd been practicing for 2 months, and every night she'd ask the same question. You'll be there, right, Dad? You promised. He had promised. Just like he'd promised to make this birthday special. Just like he'd promised her mother's memory that he'd give their daughter a good life. After the accident 5 years ago, Matthew stared at the text message. $300 versus 2 hours of watching his daughter sing. The math was cruel and simple. He needed the money desperately. The rent was due in a week, and he was short by $200. The art supplies were another $150. Without this shift, Riley's birthday would be another disappointment in a long line of things he couldn't afford to give her. His finger hovered over the reply button. Dad? Riley's sleepy voice came from the couch. You okay? He pocketed the phone and smiled. Yeah, baby girl, just checking the time. You should sleep more. School doesn't start for 3 hours. Can't sleep. Too excited about tonight. She sat up, her eyes bright despite the early hour. Mrs. Patterson said my solo is the best one in the whole concert. She said, I have natural talent. You do. Your mom would be so proud. He sat on the edge of the couch. Listen, about tonight. You're coming, right? You promised. It's at 6:30. You said you'd be there this time. This time. The words carried weight. He'd missed her last concert because of a mandatory overtime shift. Missed her award ceremony at school because the bus broke down and he couldn't afford the Uber. Missed too many moments because survival required sacrifices, and those sacrifices always seemed to come from the same place. "I'll be there," he heard himself say. Front row. Her smile made the lie worth it. Almost. After she'd gotten ready for school and Mrs. Chen from downstairs had picked her up for the carpool they'd arranged, Matthew stood alone in the apartment. He looked at his phone, at the text from his supervisor, still waiting for a response. Then another text came through. Unknown number. "Mr. Moore, this is Bailey Warren from Keystone Executive Search. We have an urgent security consulting opportunity. Cross-country flight today. Return tomorrow. $2,500 cash. Are you available?" Matthew stared at the message. $2,500. That was 2 months of breathing room. That was Riley's birthday, and rent. And maybe even fixing the heating system. That was going to fail completely any day now. "What's the job?" He typed back. "Provide discreet personal security for a corporate executive. Flight from Portland to Miami and back. Simple. Presence, low-profile protection. Your military background makes you perfect." His military background. Delta Force didn't just fade away, even though he'd been out for 6 years. The skills stayed sharp even when you were loading boxes in a warehouse. Hand-to-hand combat. Threat assessment. The ability to stay calm when everything went sideways. Apparently, someone still valued those skills enough to pay serious money. "When's the flight?" "Departs 2 p.m. today. Returns tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Today at 2 p.m., which meant missing the concert. Missing another promise to Riley. But $2,500 was impossible to turn down. That was security. That was the birthday present and rent and groceries, and maybe even a small emergency fund, so the next crisis didn't destroy them. He called Bailey Warren. Her voice was professional. Efficient. The kind that came from working with wealthy clients who expected perfection. "Mr. Moore, thank you for responding so quickly. I know the timeline is tight. Who's the client?" "Talia Jennings, CEO of Jennings Pharmaceuticals. She's traveling to Miami for emergency board meetings. There've been some threats against her company. Nothing specific, but she wants additional security beyond her usual team. Someone with real combat experience who can blend in as a regular passenger. Why not use her regular security? They're already with her. She wants someone the potential threat won't identify. Someone who looks like an ordinary traveler. Your profile suggests you'd be perfect for that." Matthew looked around his apartment. At the water stain on the ceiling he couldn't afford to fix. At Riley's schoolwork spread across the tiny table. All A's because she worked twice as hard as other kids to make him proud. At the photograph of his late wife, Melissa, holding baby Riley in the hospital, both of them glowing with a happiness that felt like another lifetime. "I have a commitment tonight," he said slowly. "My daughter's school concert. I understand. Unfortunately, this opportunity is time sensitive. If you're unavailable, we'll need to contact our backup candidate." $2,500. Walking away from that kind of money was insane. Irresponsible. It meant another month of barely scraping by. Another birthday where he couldn't give Riley what she deserved. But it also meant breaking another promise. Missing another moment. Teaching his daughter that money mattered more than showing up. "Make it 3,000. He heard himself say. "And I need to be back by tomorrow morning. Guaranteed. No delays. No extensions." There was a pause. 3,000 is acceptable. I'll send you the details. Flight is commercial. First-class ticket already purchased in your name. Meet at Portland International, Gate C7, by 1:30 p.m. He hung up and immediately texted Mrs. Chen. "Emergency work situation. Can Riley stay with you tonight? I'll be back tomorrow morning. I'll pay you extra." Mrs. Chen's response came quickly. Of course. Don't worry about payment. But Matthew, isn't tonight her concert? I know. Can you record it for me? Of course. She'll be disappointed though. I know. He typed, the words feeling like ash. Please tell her I'm sorry. Tell her this is for her birthday. Tell her I love her. He'd tell her himself. But he was a coward. He'd wait until she was at school, then send a text she'd read during lunch. By then it would be too late for her to try to talk him out of it. Too late for him to see the disappointment in her eyes and change his mind. $3,000. It was the right decision. The practical decision. The decision that kept them fed and housed and surviving. So why did it feel like he was selling something he could never buy back? Portland International Airport was chaos at 1:15 p.m. Matthew moved through the crowds with his small duffel bag, the only luggage he owned. Inside were 2 changes of clothes, toiletries, and the wallet that held his ID, and exactly $43 to his name. The $3,000 wouldn't hit his account until the job was complete. Standard contract terms that meant he was flying on faith and necessity. Gate C7 was in the newer terminal, the one with the expensive shops and restaurants that catered to business travelers who didn't blink at $16 sandwiches. Matthew had eaten a protein bar from the dollar store before leaving his apartment. It would hold him until Miami. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. His phone buzzed, Riley's text came through, and he braced himself. Mrs. Chen told me. You promised, Dad. You promised. The capital letters hurt worse than if she'd screamed at him in person. I know, baby girl. I'm so sorry. This job means I can get you that art set you wanted. The real one. For your birthday. Please understand. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, I don't want the stupid art set. I wanted you there. He typed and deleted 5 different responses. What could he say? That she was right? That he was failing at the one job that mattered most? That every choice felt like choosing between keeping her fed and being the father she deserved? Before he could respond, a voice cut through his thoughts. Mr. Moore. He looked up to see a woman in her mid-30s approaching. Professional attire, designer handbag, the kind of polished appearance that came from personal stylists and expensive salons. Bailey Warren. He assumed. That's me. Excellent. I'm Bailey Warren. We spoke on the phone. She handed him a first-class ticket and a small envelope. Inside is a phone. Use only this to contact me during the assignment. Your regular phone should be turned off once we board. Why? Security protocol. Miss Jennings takes her privacy seriously. The threats against her company have included attempts at corporate espionage. We can't risk any electronic tracking. Matthew opened the envelope. The phone was a basic model, probably a burner. The kind you saw in spy movies. This seems excessive for corporate security. Miss Jennings doesn't do anything by half measures. Bailey's smile was professional but didn't reach her eyes. She'll board last, as usual. She prefers minimal interaction with other passengers. Your job is simply to be present and aware. If you notice anything concerning, alert her head of security, Elijah Douglas. He'll be in first class as well, though he'll appear to be a regular business traveler. What kind of threats are we talking about? The company is launching a breakthrough treatment next month. Several competitors stand to lose billions. There have been anonymous messages suggesting they'll do whatever it takes to prevent the launch. Nothing specific enough for law enforcement to act on, but enough to warrant caution. Matthew processed this. Corporate warfare dressed up as security work. He'd seen worse during his time in Delta Force, but that had been clear-cut. Enemy combatants, defined missions, rules of engagement. This felt murkier. Anything else I should know? Miss Jennings can be demanding. Don't take it personally. She's under enormous pressure. Bailey checked her watch. Boarding starts in 10 minutes. Remember, you're just another passenger. Blend in. Stay alert. Simple. She left him standing there with a first-class ticket and a burner phone, feeling like he'd stepped into something more complicated than a simple security job. The text from Riley was still on his screen. I don't want the stupid art set. I wanted you there. He typed back. I love you more than anything. I'll make this up to you. I promise. Even as he sent it, he knew how hollow promises sounded when you kept breaking them. Boarding began with first-class passengers. Matthew had never flown first class in his life. The closest he'd come was military transport planes with canvas seats and no climate control. Walking down the jetway felt surreal, like he was playing dress-up in someone else's life. The first-class cabin was a different world. Wide leather seats that looked like they reclined into beds. Flight attendants offering champagne before takeoff. Passengers in business suits talking on phones about mergers and acquisitions like they were discussing the weather. Matthew found his seat. 2 amperes. Window side. He settled in, acutely aware that his worn jeans and faded jacket marked him as an outsider in this space. The man across the aisle, presumably Elijah Douglas, gave him a brief nod. Late 40s, military bearing that never quite went away, expensive watch that was probably also a tactical tool. Former Special Forces, Matthew would bet money on it. The cabin filled slowly, business travelers claiming their seats with the ease of people who flew first class regularly. A woman in her 60s with more jewelry than seemed practical for air travel. A younger couple who looked like they were heading to their honeymoon in paradise. Then she appeared. Talia Jennings was younger than Matthew had expected, probably late 30s, with sharp features and eyes that assessed everything in seconds. Her suit was dark, gray, perfectly tailored, and she moved with the confidence of someone who'd built an empire from nothing and defended it daily. She was beautiful in that intimidating way that made men nervous and competitors wary. She passed Matthew's seat without acknowledgement, settling into 1 ampere directly in front of him. Her carry-on bag probably cost more than 3 months of his rent. As the final passengers boarded, Matthew noticed Elijah Douglas watching everyone with the same assessment Matthew had been trained to do. Threat evaluation. Exits. Variables. The skills never went away, even when you were loading boxes for minimum wage. The flight attendant began the safety demonstration. Matthew had heard it 100 times during his years in service, flying to bases and deployments across the world. He barely registered the words now. His mind was on Riley. By now, she'd be in her last class before the concert, probably anxious about her solo, wondering if he'd somehow magically appear despite his text. Mrs. Chen would pick her up, take her to the auditorium, sit in the seat that should have been his. The plane pushed back from the gate. Through the window, Portland fell away beneath them. Somewhere down there, his daughter was learning another lesson about disappointment in absent fathers. Also, he could sit in a leather seat he'd never afford on his own, protecting a billionaire who probably had more security than most world leaders. $3,000, he reminded himself. $3,000, that meant stability. That meant Riley's birthday could be special. That meant the rent would get paid and maybe they could afford to turn the heat above 60 degrees this winter. But as the plane climbed into the afternoon sky, banking east toward Miami, Matthew couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just made a terrible mistake. The kind of mistake that looked good on paper but cost something you couldn't calculate in dollars. The kind of mistake that would change everything. Though he wouldn't understand that until it was far too late to turn back. The flight settled into routine at cruising altitude. The seatbelt sign dinked off, and first-class passengers began their rituals. Laptops emerged, phones were checked, drinks were ordered. The flight attendants moved through the cabin with practiced efficiency, catering to people who expected perfection as a baseline. Matthew declined the champagne and accepted water. His Delta Force training had included detailed instruction on maintaining alertness during long operations. Alcohol dulled reactions, even in small amounts. Besides, champagne felt absurd when his daughter was probably sitting in a school auditorium right now, minutes away from her solo, scanning the crowd for a father who wasn't there. He pulled out the burner phone Bailey Warren had given him. No messages, no instructions beyond. Be present and aware. The vagueness bothered him. In the military, missions came with detailed briefings, intelligence reports, clear objectives. This felt like being told to guard something without knowing what you were guarding against. Talia Jennings sat one row ahead, her seat reclined slightly. She had a laptop open, fingers moving across the keyboard with rapid precision. Even from behind, Matthew could see the intensity in her posture. This was a woman who didn't know how to relax, who probably measured her worth in quarterly earnings and market share percentages. Across the aisle, Elijah Douglas read a financial newspaper, though Matthew noticed his eyes frequently scanned the cabin. Professional paranoia. Matthew recognized it because he felt it too. Once you'd operated in environments where threats could materialize from anywhere, you never stopped. Checking exits and assessing risks. The elderly woman in the jewelry was asleep, mouth slightly open, a sleep mask over her eyes. The honeymoon couple whispered to each other, lost in their bubble of new love. A businessman 2 rows back typed furiously on his laptop, occasionally cursing under his breath at whatever crisis he was managing from 30,000 feet. Everything seemed normal, peaceful, even. Matthew's mind drifted to Melissa, his late wife. She'd been the practical one in their relationship, the one who balanced his military discipline with warmth and spontaneity. When he'd gotten out of Delta Force, she'd been thrilled. No more deployments to places he couldn't name, doing things he couldn't talk about. They'd planned a simple life. Maybe buy a small house, raise Riley somewhere safe and boring. Then a drunk driver had run a red light on a Tuesday afternoon, and all those plans had disintegrated in an instant. The years since had been a blur of survival. Learning to braid hair from internet videos, figuring out how to cook meals beyond military rations, navigating school registration and doctor's appointments, and the million small things that came with single parenthood. The warehouse job paid the bills, barely. His Delta Force pension helped, but it wasn't enough for the life he wanted to give Riley, which was why he was here, taking a job that paid more in one day than he made in a month, missing another important moment because $3,000 bought options that pride couldn't. His phone buzzed. Not the burner, his personal phone. He'd forgotten to turn it off. A text from Mrs. Chen. Concert starting soon. Riley looks beautiful. Wish you could see her. Attached was a photo. Riley in her concert dress, the navy blue one they'd found at the thrift store, and altered to fit. Her hair was pulled back, and she was smiling, but Matthew could see the sadness in her eyes. The disappointment she was trying to hide because she was a good kid, who understood that life was hard and dads had to work. He stared at the photo until his vision blurred. Rough day. The voice came from beside him. Matthew looked up to see a flight attendant, probably in her 50s, with kind eyes and the worn patience of someone who'd seen thousands of passengers at their worst. Her name tag read, Hope. Something like that. First time flying first class? Hope asked, gesturing to his clothes, his discomfort with the space. That obvious? Only to someone who's been doing this for 30 years. She smiled. Business or pleasure? Work. Last-minute job. He pocketed his phone. Had to miss something important for my daughter. Hope's expression softened. How old? 11. Almost 12. She had a concert tonight. A solo. And you're here instead. It wasn't a judgment. Just an observation. The job pays well. Better than I could turn down. She'll understand. He said it like he believed it. Will she? Or will she remember that you weren't there? Hope patted his shoulder gently. I've got 3 grown kids. Missed a lot of their moments because of this job. You want to know what they remember? Not the extra money I made working holidays. They remember the empty chairs at their events. The promises broken for overtime shifts. Matthew didn't respond. What could he say? Just something to think about. Hope moved on to the next passenger, leaving him alone with thoughts that were already eating at him. 2 rows ahead, Talia Jennings closed her laptop and pressed the call button. When Hope arrived, Talia's voice carried that particular tone of people used to immediate service. I need the Wi-Fi password again. The connection dropped. Of course, Miss Jennings. Let me get that for you. And when you have a moment, I'd like the salmon. No sauce, extra vegetables. Absolutely. Matthew watched this interaction with detached interest. This was her world. Ordering people around, expecting perfection, operating at a level where someone else always handled the details. What was it like to have that kind of power? To never worry about rent or whether you could afford new shoes for your kid. He pulled out his own phone again, ignoring the instruction to keep it off. Found the video Mrs. Chen had sent him last month from Riley's soccer game. Riley wasn't particularly athletic, but she loved soccer with pure joy. In the video, she missed a goal by about 6 feet, and the ball rolled sadly out of bounds. But she was laughing, completely unbothered, already running back into position. That was who Riley was. Resilient, adaptable, understanding beyond her years because circumstances had forced her to be. The question that haunted him: was he teaching her strength? Or was he teaching her that the people who loved her would always let her down? The flight attendant's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we're about an hour from Miami. Weather looks beautiful. 78 degrees and sunny. We'll be at Pliat deck, beginning our meal service shortly. An hour from Miami. Then a night in whatever hotel the job provided. Then the flight back tomorrow morning. Arriving at 9 a.m. He'd go straight from the airport to Riley's school, pick her up, take her somewhere special for an apology lunch. Maybe that burger place she loved. Then home to their cramped apartment where the heating still didn't work and the ceiling still leaked. But there'd be $3,000 in his account. There'd be the art set for her birthday. There'd be rent paid on time and groceries without anxiety about the total at checkout. It had to be enough. He'd make it enough. Talia Jennings stood suddenly, grabbing her phone and walking toward the front of the cabin where the lavatories were located. Elijah Douglas tracked her movement but didn't follow. Standard security protocol: stay visible, maintain distance, don't crowd the principal. Matthew watched the other passengers. The businessman still typing. The honeymoon couple now sleeping, her head on his shoulder. The elderly woman snoring softly behind her sleep mask. Everything normal. Everything fine, except for the man in seat 7C who just received a text message and was now staring at his phone with an expression that made Matthew's instincts scream warning. The man was mid-30s, athletic build, wearing a casual blazer that was slightly too heavy for Miami weather. The kind of jacket that could conceal things. His hands were shaking as he read whatever was on his screen, and his jaw was clenched so tight, Matthew could see the muscle working from 3 rows away. Then the man looked up, and his eyes met Matthew's for just a second. There was something there. Fear, determination, desperation. The man stood abruptly and headed toward the back of the plane. Maybe it was nothing. Probably, it was nothing. People got nervous texts all the time. People went to the bathroom. This was a routine flight with routine passengers doing routine things. But Matthew's Delta Force training was screaming at him that something was very, very wrong. Matthew's instincts had kept him alive through operations in 12 different countries. Those same instincts now told him to stay seated, stay calm, and watch. The man from 7C disappeared into the rear lavatory. 30 seconds passed. 45. A minute. Then everything happened at once. The man emerged from the lavatory holding a gun. Not a large weapon. Something compact that had probably been disassembled and hidden in carry-on luggage. But size didn't matter at 30,000 feet in a pressurized cabin. Any gun was a catastrophic threat. "Nobody move," the man shouted, his voice cracking with adrenaline. "This aircraft is now under our control. Our control. Plural." Matthew's eyes swept the cabin. The businessman who'd been typing furiously was now standing, also armed. A woman 3 rows back, who'd seemed to be sleeping, rose with a third weapon. 3 hijackers, coordinated timing, strategic positioning throughout first class. The honeymoon couple screamed, Other passengers gasped, froze, some raising their hands instinctively. The elderly woman with the jewelry woke with a start, her sleep mask askew, confusion turning to terror as she registered what was happening. Elijah Douglas was already moving, his hand going to what was probably a concealed weapon, but the female hijacker was faster. Security, don't even think about it. Hands where I can see them, now. Douglas hesitated, calculating odds that weren't in his favor. 3 weapons, confined space, innocent passengers in crossfire zones. He slowly raised hands. Smart man, the woman said. She was late 30s, athletic build, moving with military precision. Everyone else, hands visible, phones on the floor. Do it now. Matthew complied, placing his burner phone and his personal phone on the floor in front of him. His mind was racing through possibilities, threat assessments, potential responses. 3 hijackers suggested careful planning. The weapons meant connections to bypass airport security or inside help. The coordination indicated training. This wasn't random. This was professional. The man from 7C moved toward the cockpit, keeping his weapon trained on the passengers. Pilot, open this door, or I start shooting passengers. You have 10 seconds. The cockpit door remained closed. Modern aircraft had reinforced doors designed to withstand this exact scenario. Post-2001 protocols meant pilots never opened that door for threats. 5 seconds, the hijacker called out. Wait, a voice said. Talia Jennings stood, her hands raised, her expression controlled despite the fear Matthew could see in her eyes. You don't want the pilots. You want me. The 3 hijackers exchanged glances. The man from 7C smiled, smart and observant. That's why you're worth $50 million, Miss Jennings. 50 million. The number hit Matthew like a physical force. This wasn't about terrorism or political statements. This was a kidnapping dressed up as a hijacking. My company doesn't negotiate with criminals, Talia said, her voice steady. Your board of directors will when we start throwing passengers out the emergency exit. The female hijacker gestured with her weapon. Row by row until they wire the money to our account. She wasn't bluffing. Matthew had seen enough combat to recognize people who would absolutely follow through on their threats. These weren't amateurs playing at danger. They were committed. How does this work? Talia asked. You can't land this plane and escape with me. We're not landing. The businessman, hijacker said. He had a slight accent, Eastern European maybe. We're diverting. The pilots will receive new coordinates shortly. A private airstrip in the Bahamas. Your company wires the money. We land. We leave with you as insurance until the funds clear. Then everyone goes home. Except me. That depends on how cooperative your board is. Matthew remained completely still, his hands visible, his expression neutral. He needed to appear like every other terrified passenger. Just a regular guy in over his head. Not someone who'd spent a decade training for situations exactly like this. His eyes tracked the hijackers' positions. 7C man was nearest the cockpit, about 12 feet from Matthew's seat. The businessman was mid-cabin, controlling the largest group of passengers. The woman was near the rear, blocking the aft exit. They'd positioned themselves to create overlapping fields of fire with no blind spots. Whoever planned this knew what they were doing. I need to make a call, Talia said, to my CFO. She has authorization to access emergency funds. The female hijacker laughed. You think we're stupid? No calls. No communication. Your board will figure it out when this plane disappears from radar and the demands arrive. How will they receive demands if we can't communicate? We have someone on the ground handling that. The man from 7C checked his watch. Right about now, actually. Your headquarters in Boston should be receiving a very detailed message about what happens if they don't cooperate. Matthew filed that information away. Someone on the ground meant a larger operation. At least 4 people involved, probably more. Resources, planning, inside information about Talia's schedule and security protocols. This had been in motion for weeks, maybe months. "Everyone sit down," the businessman ordered. "Hands on armrests, where we can see them. Anyone moves wrong, anyone tries to be a hero, and we demonstrate how serious we are. Understood?" Passengers nodded, settling into their seats with shaking hands and pale faces. The honeymoon couple clung to each other. The elderly woman was crying silently. Elijah Douglas sat rigid, his jaw clenched, probably running through the same calculations Matthew was making and reaching the same conclusion. Any move right now got people killed. The man from 7C grabbed Talia's arm. "You're coming with me." He pulled her toward the front of the cabin, away from other passengers. "The rest of you, stay exactly where you are. My colleagues will be watching. Test us, and find out what happens." He forced Talia into the front galley area, partially hidden from the main cabin. Matthew could still see them through the gap between seats. The hijacker kept his weapon pressed against Talia's side while pulling out a satellite phone. "It's done," he said into the phone. "We have the package. Proceed with phase 2. Package, like Talia, was cargo instead of a person. Matthew's hands gripped the armrests, forcing himself to remain calm. Every instinct screamed to act, to move, to neutralize the threats. He could probably take down the nearest hijacker before the others reacted. His Delta Force training had included extensive close-quarters combat, including aircraft scenarios, but probably wasn't good enough. Not with this many innocent lives at stake. Not when 3 weapons were already drawn and fingers were on triggers. So he waited, watched, listened, and planned. The female hijacker walked down the aisle, collecting phones from the floor. "Nice and easy, people. Slide them toward me, with your feet. No sudden movements." When she reached Matthew's row, she paused. Her eyes lingered on him for a moment, assessing. "You're calm." "Scared out of my mind," Matthew said, letting his voice shake slightly. Not hard to fake when he was genuinely terrified, just not for himself. For Riley, who might lose her only parent. For these passengers who'd boarded a routine flight and found themselves in a nightmare. She didn't sound convinced, but moved on. At the front of the cabin, the man from 7C was still on his satellite phone. Matthew caught fragments of the conversation. "Confirmed at 32,000 feet. ETA to coordinates is 90 minutes. Payment window closes in 3 hours, or we start the demonstration." Demonstration. That meant killing passengers. These people weren't making empty threats. Talia remained remarkably composed, though Matthew could see her hands trembling slightly. She was terrified but fighting to control it, probably running calculations about her company's response, about survival odds, about how this situation could possibly end without tragedy. The businessman hijacker addressed the cabin. "Listen carefully, because I'm only saying this once. We have no interest in hurting anyone, except as necessary to achieve our goal. Miss Jennings' company will pay $50 million for her safe return. Once that happens, you all go home with a dramatic story to tell. But if anyone interferes, if anyone tries to play hero, we will kill passengers until compliance is achieved. That's not a threat, it's a promise. We've already decided who dies first if it comes to that." His eyes landed on the honeymoon couple. The young woman started sobbing harder. 3 hours. The businessman continued. "That's how long you need to sit quietly and behave. 3 hours, and this is over. Can you manage that?" No one answered. What answer was there? Matthew's mind raced through scenarios. 3 hijackers, 3 weapons, confined space, 90 minutes until they reached whatever coordinates they'd given the pilots. After that, a landing at some private strip where they'd have vehicles waiting, possibly more personnel, a head start before authorities could respond. The window for intervention was closing, but intervention required the right moment, the right opening, and probably accepting that not everyone would survive. His phone buzzed on the floor, where the female hijacker had left it after collecting the devices. She'd been sloppy, not properly securing them. Through the screen, visible even face down, Matthew could see an incoming text notification. From Mrs. Chen, Riley's solo was beautiful. She cried after because you weren't there. Call when you can. His daughter had cried because he'd chosen $3,000 over being present. Because he'd thought money could substitute for showing up. Now, he might never get the chance to apologize. To explain, to be the father she deserved instead of the one who kept breaking promises for paychecks. The female hijacker noticed him staring at the phone. Forget about it. Forget about everything except staying alive. That's your only job now. Matthew raised his eyes to meet hers. Understood. What he didn't say. Staying alive was exactly what Delta Force had trained him to do. And when the moment came, when that opening appeared, he'd do whatever it took to make sure everyone in this cabin had the chance to see their families again. Even if it cost him everything. 30 minutes into the hijacking, the initial terror had settled into cold dread. Passengers sat frozen, some crying silently, others staring blankly ahead. The elderly woman with the jewelry had gone pale and was breathing shallowly. Matthew worried she might be having a heart attack, but couldn't risk drawing attention by asking. The businessman hijacker had taken a position in the center aisle, where he could monitor everyone. The female operative remained near the rear exit. The man from 7C kept Talia in the front galley, his weapon never wavering. Matthew used the stillness to observe details. The businessman's watch was expensive, Swiss-made, probably $20,000. Not the accessory of someone desperate for money. The female hijacker's shoes were tactical boots disguised as casual footwear, the kind special operations personnel wore. These people had resources and training, which meant this wasn't about the money. 50 million was the cover story. Can I ask a question? Talia's voice carried from the galley. She'd found some composure, that CEO authority creeping back into her tone despite the gun at her side. Depends on the question, her captor replied. Who hired you? Because this operation cost serious money to plan and execute. The weapons, the inside information about my schedule, the coordination. Someone funded this. I want to know who. The man from 7C smiled. You really can't help yourself, can you? Always analyzing, always looking for the angle. That's what got you here, Miss Jennings. What's that supposed to mean? It means you've made enemies, powerful ones. People who don't appreciate your company's business practices. Be specific. He laughed. You developed a cancer treatment that actually works. Do you have any idea how many companies lose billions when patients stop needing their expensive drugs that barely extend life by months? You're disrupting a very profitable system. Matthew's attention sharpened. This wasn't random corporate espionage. This was about eliminating competition. So what? Talia said. You kill me, and my company continues. The treatment still launches. You've accomplished nothing except federal charges. We're not killing you, we're discrediting you. By the time this is over, you'll be painted as incompetent, reckless, responsible for putting hundreds of passengers in danger because of your poor security decisions. Your board will force you out. The treatment launch will be delayed during leadership transition, and our employers get another year to prepare their own competing products. That's insane. No one will believe I'm responsible for being kidnapped. Won't they? You fired your entire security team 3 months ago over some paranoid conspiracy theory. You've been operating with minimal protection, against everyone's advice. This hijacking just proves you're not fit to lead a company that controls life-saving medications. The narrative practically writes itself. Talia was silent for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was harder. The conspiracy wasn't a theory. Someone on my security team was feeding information to competitors. I found proof. And fired everyone instead of just the mole. Real smart leadership there. I fired everyone because I couldn't identify which one was compromised. The leak was sophisticated. The man from 7C shrugged. Doesn't matter now. What matters is in 3 hours, your company pays $50 million. You're returned safely, and then the media circus begins. Every news outlet will run stories about the dangerous CEO whose arrogance endangered hundreds of lives. Your stock crashes. Your board removes you. Mission accomplished. Matthew processed this. They weren't planning to keep the money or kill anyone. This was pure reputation destruction. Sophisticated and cruel. There's something you should know, Talia said carefully. The person feeding information to your employers, they're still working for my company, still in a position of trust, and they're about to get caught. The hijacker's expression flickered. You're bluffing. Am I? 3 days ago, my IT security team identified unusual access patterns in our confidential files. Someone's been downloading clinical trial data, financial projections, strategic plans. We've been monitoring them, building a case. By tomorrow, the FBI will have everything they need for arrests. Impossible. We have someone on the inside who would have warned us. You mean Noel Chambers? My former chief operating officer who's been selling corporate secrets for 18 months. Talia smiled coldly. She's the one we've been monitoring. Every download, every communication with your employers, every penny she's received. All documented. The man from 7C's hand tightened on his weapon. You're lying, trying to create doubt. Call your people on the ground. Ask them if Noel Chambers showed up to work today. Spoiler. She didn't. She's currently in FBI custody. The hijacker pulled out his satellite phone with his free hand, keeping the gun trained on Talia. He dialed, waited. His expression grew darker with each passing second. Why aren't you answering? He muttered. Matthew watched this exchange with growing understanding. Talia was gambling, trying to fracture the hijacker's confidence. Whether her claims were true or calculated lies, she was creating uncertainty. The businessman hijacker moved closer. Problem? Can't reach our contact. Could be nothing. Could be communication issues. Or she's telling the truth, and this whole operation is compromised. The female operative joined them, leaving her position near the rear exit. The 3 hijackers formed a cluster near the front galley, their attention momentarily focused inward rather than on the passengers. It was the opening Matthew had been waiting for. He caught Elijah Douglas's eye. The security professional was 3 rows back, across the aisle. Matthew made the smallest gesture with his hand, a tactical signal from his Delta Force days. Wait. Be ready. Douglas gave an almost imperceptible nod. He understood. The hijacker's argument was escalating. We should abort, the female operative said. If Chambers is compromised, they know everything. Our exit strategy, our contacts, all of it. We're committed, the man from 7C insisted. The pilots have already diverted. We're 40 minutes from the coordinates. We finish this. Finish it how? If she's telling the truth, there's no one on the ground to collect the ransom. No extraction team waiting at the airstrip. We land and walk into a trap. She's bluffing. Has to be. This is psychological warfare. Talia spoke up. You want proof? Check the news. It should be breaking right about now. Major pharmaceutical espionage case. Arrests in Boston, billions in fraudulent activity. My company released a statement 2 hours ago. The businessman pulled out his phone, accessing the internet through the aircraft's Wi-Fi. His face went white. She's not lying. It's all over the news. Multiple arrests. Federal charges. Our employers' names are everywhere. The 3 hijackers stared at each other. Matthew could see the moment they realized they'd been sacrificed. Their employers had burned them, probably never intending for anyone to survive this operation. Dead hijackers couldn't testify about who hired them. We need to land this plane, the female operative said. Negotiate immunity in exchange for testimony against the people who set this up. They'll never give us immunity, the man from 7C said. We hijacked a commercial aircraft. We threatened to kill passengers. We're looking at life in federal prison. Better than dying when this plane runs out of fuel over the ocean. Matthew remained still, waiting. The hijackers were fracturing, their unified front collapsing under the weight of betrayal. This was when people made mistakes. There's another option, Talia said quietly. Let me help you. All 3 hijackers turned to stare at her. Help us? The businessman said. We just terrorized a plane full of people and held you hostage. And your victims too, manipulated by the same people who've been trying to destroy my company. You were told this was a simple kidnapping for ransom. Instead, you're pawns in a conspiracy that planned for your deaths from the beginning. The man from 7C shook his head. Why would you help us? Because you have information I need. Names, documentation, proof of who orchestrated this. You testify, and I guarantee you the best legal representation money can buy. You might still serve time, but not life sentences, and the people who actually deserve to rot in prison will join you. Matthew watched this negotiation with a mix of admiration and caution. Talia was offering them a lifeline, but could they trust her? Could she trust them? How do we know you won't just have us arrested the second we land? The female operative asked. You don't. You have to take my word for it, which I know isn't worth much right now. Talia paused. But consider your alternatives. Keep going with this hijacking and hope for an outcome that was never going to happen. Or work with me to take down the people who put all of us in this situation. The three hijackers exchanged glances. Matthew could see them calculating odds, weighing options, recognizing that they were trapped either way. We need guarantees, the businessman said finally. I'll give you whatever guarantees I can. But first, we need to turn this plane around and contact authorities. Tell them we're resolving this peacefully. The longer we stay diverted, the worse your situation gets. The man from 7C looked at Talia for a long moment. Then he slowly lowered his weapon. Okay, we talk. But if this is a trick, if you're setting us up, I promise you'll regret it. No tricks, just survival. For all of us. Matthew felt the tension in his shoulders ease slightly. The immediate crisis was de-escalating. No one had to die today, but he knew better than to relax completely. Desperate people made unpredictable choices, and this situation was far from over. The shift in the aircraft's atmosphere was palpable. The three hijackers still held weapons, but they were lowered, no longer pointed directly at passengers. People remained frozen in their seats, afraid to believe the danger might be passing, terrified of doing anything that could reignite the violence. Talia stood in the galley with the man from 7C, whose name turned out to be Anthony White. The businessman was Reggie Bishop, and the female operative introduced herself as Melanie Harper. The names meant nothing to Matthew, but the way they carried themselves spoke volumes. These were professionals who'd been hired for their skills and then betrayed by their employers. We need to contact the pilots, Talia said. Tell them to resume the original flight path to Miami. And say what? Anthony asked. That we've decided to cooperate? They won't believe us. They'll think it's a trap. Then we need someone they will believe. Someone neutral. Talia's eyes scanned the cabin and landed on Matthew. You. In 2 amperes. What's your name? Matthew hesitated, then decided honesty was the best approach. Matthew Moore. What do you do, Mr. Moore? I work in a warehouse, loading trucks. Talia studied him with sharp eyes that missed nothing. You've been remarkably calm this entire time. Most people in your position would be terrified. I am terrified, but controlled, observant. You have training. What kind? Matthew glanced at Elijah Douglas, who was watching this exchange with interest. No point in lying now. Former Delta Force. Been out for 6 years. The three hijackers' weapons came up again, trained on Matthew. You're military? Melanie said, her voice tight. Former. I'm a civilian now. Just trying to get home to my daughter. A Delta Force operative happens to be on this specific flight, Reggie said. That's a hell of a coincidence. It's not a coincidence, Talia said slowly, realization dawning on her face. He's here because I hired him. Through my security contractor. He was supposed to be additional protection. Someone who'd blend in as a regular passenger. You hired me. Matthew looked at her, confused. I was hired by Bailey Warren, from Keystone Executive Search, who works for my head of security operations. This was part of my new security protocol. Unidentified protective personnel, on the flights, people who wouldn't be obvious targets, if something went wrong. Anthony laughed bitterly. So we had a Delta Force operator watching us the entire time, and didn't know it. Great operational security on our part. I wasn't watching you, Matthew said. I didn't know there was a threat. I was just here to do a job and get home. You could have stopped us, Melanie said. When we first revealed ourselves, you were trained for this. Why didn't you act? Because acting would have gotten people killed. 3 weapons in a confined space with innocent passengers everywhere. The odds weren't good enough. Elijah Douglas spoke up for the first time since the hijacking began. He's right. I ran the same calculation. Any move would have resulted in casualties. So you both just sat there, Reggie said. We waited for an opening. For a moment when intervention would save lives instead of costing them. Matthew met the hijackers' eyes. That moment never came. Until now. When you're choosing to stand down, the tension held for a long moment. Then Anthony lowered his weapon again. Okay, so we have a Delta Force operator and corporate security on this plane, along with 3 hijackers who just realized they've been set up. How do we turn this into something other than a disaster? Mr. Moore, Talia said, you're trained in crisis negotiation? Some. Enough to know we need to establish credibility with the pilots and with authorities on the ground. What do you suggest? Matthew thought quickly. We need a phone call to the cockpit. One of the hijackers admits what happened, that they're standing down. Then I verify it as a neutral passenger. Then you, Miss Jennings, confirm you're safe and requesting that we return to the original flight plan. The pilots won't just take our word for it, Elijah said. They'll assume we're under duress. Probably. But if we can convince them to contact authorities, to verify Miss Jennings' claims about the arrests in Boston, they'll understand the situation has changed. Talia nodded. It's worth trying. She looked at Anthony. Are you willing to make that call? He stared at her for a long moment. If I do this, if we cooperate, I need your word that you'll follow through on legal representation, that you won't abandon us once we land. You have my word, for whatever that's worth to you. It's worth something. You could have lied about the arrests to create chaos, but you told the truth, even though it gave away your advantage. That says something about your character. Anthony moved to the intercom system. His hand shook slightly as he picked up the handset. Cockpit, this is the passenger who initiated the hijacking. I need to speak with the captain. There was a long silence. Then a male voice, tight with controlled fear. This is Captain Edwards. What do you want? I want to tell you that the situation has changed. We're standing down. No one is going to be hurt. We need to return to the original flight path to Miami. Why should I believe you? Because the people who hired us to do this have been arrested. Because we've been set up. And because Miss Jennings has offered us a way out that doesn't involve everyone dying. Another silence. Put Miss Jennings on. Talia took the handset. Captain Edwards, this is Talia Jennings. I'm unharmed. The hijackers have agreed to cooperate in exchange for information about the conspiracy behind this attack. I'm requesting that we continue to Miami where federal authorities can take everyone into custody safely. Miss Jennings, are you under duress? Yes, technically. There are still weapons present. But the immediate threat has passed. I need you to contact the FBI. Ask them about the arrests that happened this morning in Boston related to pharmaceutical espionage. Ask them about Noel Chambers. Once you verify that information, you'll understand why these hijackers are willing to negotiate. Stand by. The line went quiet. Matthew could hear muffled conversation from the cockpit, probably the pilots conferring with air traffic control and federal authorities. The cabin remained frozen. Passengers who'd been crying had stopped, afraid to hope, afraid to breathe. The honeymoon couple held hands so tightly their knuckles were white. The elderly woman was praying quietly, her lips moving soundlessly. 5 minutes passed. 10. Finally, Captain Edwards' voice returned. I've been in contact with FBI and FAA. They've confirmed arrests in Boston this morning related to corporate espionage and attempted market manipulation. They're willing to negotiate terms for the hijackers' surrender if Miss Jennings vouches for their cooperation. I vouch for them, Talia said immediately. They were manipulated by the same people who tried to destroy my company. They deserve the chance to help bring those people to justice. Understood. We're resuming course to Miami. ETA is now 55 minutes. FBI will have agents waiting at the gate. Miss Jennings, the hijackers need to disarm immediately and place all weapons in the forward galley. Can you confirm they'll comply? Talia looked at Anthony, Reggie, and Melanie. Will you? Anthony set his weapon on the galley counter. After a moment's hesitation, Reggie and Melanie did the same. Weapons are secured, Talia said into the handset. We're complying fully. Good. Everyone stay calm. We'll have you on the ground soon. The line disconnected. The collective exhale from the passengers was audible. Some people started crying with relief. Others remained motionless, still processing that they were going to survive. Matthew felt his own tension begin to drain. His hands were shaking now that the immediate crisis had passed. Adrenaline aftermath. Talia walked down the aisle toward his seat. Mr. Moore, thank you for not making a bad situation worse. I didn't do anything. Exactly. You exercised restraint when action would have been catastrophic. That takes a different kind of courage. She moved past him to address the cabin. Everyone, I know this has been traumatic. When we land, there will be medical personnel and counselors available. My company will cover all expenses related to this incident. And I promise you, the people responsible for putting you in danger will face justice. Matthew pulled out his phone, saw the time. 6:47 p.m. Riley's concert had ended over an hour ago. He'd missed it entirely. For a job that had turned into a nightmare. For $3,000, that suddenly seemed meaningless. He texted Mrs. Chen, I'm okay. Long story. Tell Riley I love her, and I'm so sorry. I'll be home tomorrow. The response came quickly. Thank God, you're safe. Riley's worried. Call when you can. As the plane descended toward Miami, Matthew stared out the window at the darkening sky. He'd survived a hijacking, helped prevent a tragedy, and somehow, that made missing his daughter's concert feel even worse. Because she'd never know how close he'd come to never coming home at all. Miami International Airport was surrounded by emergency vehicles when Flight 447 touched down. Fire trucks, ambulances, FBI, tactical units, all positioned around the designated gate. Matthew watched through the window as the aircraft taxied, feeling the weight of the past 3 hours settling into his bones. The captain's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we've landed safely in Miami. Please remain seated until federal agents board and provide instructions. Medical personnel are standing by for anyone who needs assistance. Anthony White stood in the galley, hands raised and visible. Reggie Bishop and Melanie Harper did the same. They'd agreed to full cooperation, but Matthew could see the fear in their eyes. They were about to face consequences for actions they'd committed, regardless of who'd manipulated them into it. FBI agents boarded within seconds, weapons drawn, voices commanding. Everyone stay seated, hands where we can see them. The 3 hijackers were taken into custody first, led off the aircraft in handcuffs. Anthony caught Matthew's eye as he passed. Thank you for not shooting us when you had the chance. Thank you for choosing to stand down. Then they were gone, and agents began interviewing passengers one by one. The process took hours. Statements, contact information, medical evaluations. The honeymoon couple was taken to the hospital for shock treatment. The elderly woman needed oxygen. Most passengers were crying or shaking or both. Matthew gave his statement to a female agent who seemed unsurprised by his military background. You're the security contractor Miss Jennings hired. Apparently, I didn't know that's what the job was. Lucky for everyone you were on board. My superiors think your presence kept the hijackers from escalating. I didn't do anything. Sometimes. That's the right call. She closed her notebook. You're free to go, Mr. Moore. We'll be in touch for follow-up interviews, but we have your contact information. Matthew stood, grabbed his duffel bag, and headed toward the gate. His whole body ached with exhaustion. It was nearly 11 p.m. Riley would be asleep by now, probably cried out and confused about why her father had missed yet another important moment. Mr. Moore, wait. Talia Jennings stood near the gate, flanked by new security personnel and what looked like a team of lawyers. She'd been questioned separately, probably given different treatment because of her status and her role as the intended kidnapping victim. Miss Jennings, we need to talk. Do you have a few minutes? He thought about the hotel room the job was supposed to provide, about the 6 a.m. flight back to Portland tomorrow. I guess. They moved to a private lounge, away from the chaos. Talia's lawyers and security waited outside, giving them privacy. First, Talia said, I'm sorry you were put in that situation. If I'd known the job posting would lead to a hijacking, I never would have approved it. Not your fault. The people who planned this are the ones responsible. Still, you signed up for simple security work and ended up in a life-threatening crisis. That deserves more than $3,000. Matthew shrugged. A deal's a deal. What if I offered you a different deal? Talia leaned forward. I need a new head of personal security. Someone with actual combat experience who can think under pressure. Someone who doesn't panic when plans fall apart. You proved today you're that person. Miss Jennings, I'm not qualified to run corporate security. I load boxes in a warehouse. Your former Delta Force. You remained calm during a hijacking. You correctly assessed that intervention would cause casualties and exercised restraint. Those are the exact qualifications I need. He almost laughed. I can't just abandon my life in Portland. I have a daughter. Responsibilities. Bring her. The job is based in Boston, where my and headquarters are, but it includes relocation assistance, housing stipend, and a salary of $180,000 per year plus benefits. The number hit him like a physical blow. $180,000. That was more than he'd make in 5 years at the warehouse. Why me? You could hire anyone. Ex-Secret Service, former Navy SEALs, people with actual corporate security experience. Because when those hijackers had guns pointed at innocent people, you didn't try to be a hero. You calculated risk versus reward and made the hard choice to wait. That judgment is what I need protecting my operations. Not someone who thinks every problem gets solved with aggression. Matthew thought about Riley, about their cramped apartment, about the concert he'd missed, and the birthday that was coming up. This job would change everything. Real financial security, good schools, opportunities he couldn't provide on a warehouse salary, but it also meant uprooting Riley's life. Moving across the country. Leaving the only home she'd known since her mother died. I need to think about it, he said. Talk to my daughter. Of course, take a few days. But Matthew, I hope you'll seriously consider it. Today showed me I need people I can trust. People who'll tell me the truth even when it's uncomfortable. You're that kind of person. She handed him a business card. My direct number, call me when you've decided. After she left, Matthew sat alone in the lounge. His phone showed 11 missed calls from Mrs. Chen and 6 text messages from Riley. Dad, where are you? Mrs. Chen said you're okay, but won't tell me what happened. I'm scared. Please call me. Dad, please. I love you. He called immediately. Riley answered on the first ring. Dad? Hey, baby girl. I'm okay. I'm so sorry I scared you. Mrs. Chen said something happened on your flight. That you're safe but couldn't call until now. What happened? How did you explain a hijacking to an 11-year-old? There was an emergency on the plane. Some people tried to do something bad, but everyone worked together and nobody got hurt. It's over now. Were you scared? Very scared. But mostly, I was thinking about you. About getting home to you. She was quiet for a moment. You missed my concert. I know. Riley, I'm so sorry. I know I keep saying that, but I mean it. I wanted to be there more than anything. Mrs. Chen recorded it. It's not the same, but you can watch it when you get home. I will. And baby girl, something else happened. I got offered a new job, a really good one. But it would mean moving. To Boston. Leaving Portland. Moving. Like to a new apartment. To a new city. New school. Everything would be different. Another long silence. Then, would you be home more? Would you stop missing things? The question cut deep. Yeah, I'd be home a lot more. Better hours. Better pay. We'd have a real place to live instead of that studio apartment. Can I think about it? Of course. We'll talk about it when I get home tomorrow. This is a decision we make. Together. Okay, Dad. I'm really glad you're safe. Me too, baby girl. Get some sleep. I'll see you tomorrow. After hanging up, Matthew looked at Talia's business card. $180,000. A chance to actually be present in his daughter's life, instead of constantly scrambling to survive. The question was whether he had the courage to accept it. 3 weeks later, Matthew stood in front of a brownstone apartment in Boston's South End, keys in hand, still not quite believing this was real. The moving truck had arrived that morning with their belongings, which didn't fill even half the space. 2 bedrooms, hardwood floors, a kitchen with actual counter space. Riley had her own room for the first time in years. This is ours? Riley asked, her eyes wide as she explored. Like, we live here now? We live here now. She ran from room to room, her excitement infectious. Dad, there's a dishwasher. And the bathroom has a bathtub, not just a shower. And my room is huge. It wasn't huge by most standards, but compared to sharing a pull-out couch in a studio apartment, it was a palace. Matthew's phone rang. Talia's name on the screen. Hello? How's the new place? Riley loves it. Thank you again for the relocation assistance. That's what the package includes. Listen, I need you at headquarters tomorrow at 8 a.m. Your official start date. We'll get you set up with credentials, introduce you to the security team, and start training on our protocols. I'll be there. And Matthew, bring Riley by after school sometime this week. I'd like to meet the person who convinced you to take this job. After hanging up, Matthew found Riley in her new room, already arranging her soccer trophies on the shelf. That was my new boss. She wants to meet you. The lady from the plane? The one who got almost kidnapped? Yeah. She's curious about you. Riley considered this. Is she nice? She's complicated, but I think she's trying to be good. The first week was overwhelming. Jennings Pharmaceuticals headquarters was a gleaming tower in downtown Boston. 32 floors of research labs, executive offices, and enough security protocols to protect a small nation. Matthew met his team, 6 professionals who'd been hired after the previous security staff had been terminated. They were competent, but wary, unsure about reporting to someone with no corporate experience. Elijah Douglas helped bridge that gap. He'd been offered a position as well, serving as Matthew's second in command. They don't trust you yet, Elijah said during a coffee break. You're an outsider who got promoted over people with more traditional qualifications. I know. I'm not sure I trust myself in this role. You kept everyone alive during a hijacking. That counts for something. But you'll need to prove yourself in other ways. Corporate security isn't combat operations. The proving ground came faster than expected. 2 weeks into the job, Matthew received an anonymous email at his work address. No subject line, just a message. Tell Talia Jennings to step down or face consequences. This is your only warning. He immediately flagged it for the cybersecurity team and informed Talia. She was in a meeting with her board of directors, but called him back within minutes. What kind of consequences? She asked. Unspecified. Could be nothing. Could be serious. I've already alerted FBI given the recent hijacking attempt. Good. Increase security protocols. I have a product launch in 2 weeks that can't be delayed. The launch was for the cancer treatment that had triggered the hijacking plot. Despite the arrests in Boston, despite the conspiracy being exposed, Jennings Pharmaceuticals was moving forward, which meant the people who'd tried to stop them might try again. Matthew spent the next week analyzing threat vectors, coordinating with law enforcement, and learning that corporate security was 90% prevention and 10% response. It was tedious work, reviewing access logs and vetting personnel and updating emergency procedures. Then Riley's school called. She'd gotten into a fight with another student who'd made comments about her father being a fake security guard who got lucky on a plane. Matthew left work immediately, arriving at the principal's office to find his daughter with a bloody nose and defiant expression. She started it, Riley said, talking about how you don't deserve your job. The other girl's parents were wealthy, connected, exactly the kind of people who look down on someone like Matthew. They demanded Riley be suspended. The principal seemed inclined to agree until Matthew quietly mentioned that he could provide documentation of the harassment their daughter had engaged in, including text messages to other students mocking Riley's background. The situation was resolved with apologies all around, but it drove home a hard truth. Their new life came with new problems. Wealth and status created resentment. Riley was learning to navigate a world where people judged you by your bank account and connections. That evening, Talia called. I heard about the school incident. Is Riley okay? How did you hear about it? I make it my business to know what affects my key personnel. Listen, there's a private school near headquarters. Excellent academics, diverse student body, strong anti-bullying policies. I can get Riley enrolled if you're interested. Miss Jennings, I can't keep accepting favors. It's not a favor. It's an investment in your peace of mind so you can focus on keeping me alive. Consider it part of your benefits package. Matthew discussed it with Riley that night. She was hesitant about changing schools again, but the promise of a fresh start where nobody knew about the hijacking was appealing. Will kids there be nicer? She asked. I don't know. People are people everywhere. But maybe it'll be better. The new school was better. Smaller classes, engaged teachers, students from families who valued education over status. Riley started making friends, joining the soccer team, slowly building a life that didn't revolve around survival. But Matthew's challenges were escalating. The anonymous threats continued, growing more specific. References to Talia's schedule, her travel plans, details that suggested inside information. Someone within the company was leaking again. We have a mole, Matthew told Elijah during a late-night security review. Someone's feeding our protocols to whoever sent these threats. How do we find them? Carefully. And we start by assuming everyone is suspect until proven otherwise. It was going to be a long few months, but as Matthew locked up his apartment that night, checking on Riley sleeping peacefully in her own room, he knew it was worth it. This life, complicated and challenging as it was, beat the alternative. The product launch was set for a Thursday morning in October, 3 months after the hijacking. Jennings Pharmaceuticals had rented the Boston Convention Center, invited medical professionals from around the world, and planned to unveil clinical trial results that would revolutionize cancer treatment. The event represented billions in future revenue and, more importantly, hope for millions of patients. It also represented the perfect target. Matthew had spent weeks coordinating security. Metal detectors at every entrance, background checks on all attendees, security personnel positioned throughout the venue. But the anonymous threats had evolved from vague warnings to specific details about the event itself. They know the floor plan. Matthew told Talia 2 days before the launch. They referenced the stage layout and exit positions. That information isn't public. So we definitely have someone on the inside feeding them intelligence. Yes, and I think I know who. Matthew had been running a quiet investigation, monitoring access logs and communication patterns. One name kept appearing in suspicious contexts. Chloe Martinez, Talia's executive assistant. She had access to everything. Schedules, security protocols, confidential files, and her bank records, obtained through FBI cooperation, showed deposits that couldn't be explained by her salary. Chloe. Talia looked stricken. She's been with me for 4 years. I trust her completely. Which makes her the perfect mole. We need to confront her before the launch. They brought Chloe into Talia's office that evening with FBI agents waiting in the adjacent conference room. The assistant's face went pale the moment she saw the documentation Matthew had compiled. I didn't have a choice, Chloe said, tears streaming down her face. They threatened my family, said if I didn't cooperate, my sister would have an accident. Who threatened you? Talia asked. I don't know. All communication was through encrypted messages. They knew everything about me, about my family. I was terrified. The FBI took over from there, but the damage was done. Security protocols had been compromised. The launch event was vulnerable. Matthew recommended canceling or postponing, but Talia refused. We're not letting them win. We've worked too hard, and patients are depending on this treatment. We move forward. Matthew respected her courage, even as it terrified him. Then we change everything. New floor plan, different schedule, additional security. Make it impossible for them to execute whatever they're planning. The next 48 hours were chaos. Revising layouts, briefing security teams, coordinating with Boston PD and FBI. Matthew barely slept, running on coffee and determination. Riley stayed with Mrs. Chen, who'd agreed to move to Boston to continue helping with her after-school care. The morning of the launch, Matthew arrived at the convention center at 4 a.m. Security sweeps, final checks, positioning personnel. By 7 a.m., when attendees started arriving, everything was as ready as it could be. Talia arrived at 8:30, flanked by Elijah and 2 other security personnel. She wore a navy suit and the expression of someone about to step into battle. How are we looking? She asked Matthew. As secure as possible given the circumstances. But I'm not comfortable with this. Noted. Let's do it anyway. The event began at 9 a.m. Talia took the stage to thunderous applause, presenting clinical trial results that showed her treatment increased 5-year survival rates by 40% compared to existing options. The medical community was stunned. Reporters scrambled to file stories. Stock prices for Jennings Pharmaceuticals surged. Matthew watched from backstage, monitoring security feeds, waiting for something to go wrong. It came during the question and answer session. A man in the 3rd row stood, ostensibly to ask about treatment protocols. Instead, he pulled out a canister and threw it toward the stage. Gas, Matthew shouted into his radio. Clear the stage now. Security personnel grabbed Talia, rushing her toward the nearest exit as the canister released a cloud of white smoke. Panic erupted. Attendees rushed for exits. Alarms blared. Matthew moved against the crowd, tackling the man who'd thrown the canister. They went down hard, Matthew's Delta Force training taking over. Within seconds, he had the attacker restrained, face down, arms secured. Boston PD swarmed in. The white smoke turned out to be harmless. Just a smoke bomb designed to create chaos. But the intent was clear. Disrupt the launch. Undermine confidence in Talia's leadership. Create the appearance of incompetence. Building is secure, Elijah reported over the radio. Miss Jennings is safe. No injuries reported. Matthew handed the attacker to police and went to find Talia. She was in a secure room off the main hall, her security team surrounding her, but she was already on her phone coordinating response. Is everyone okay? She asked when she saw Matthew. Everyone's fine. You're fine. The launch continues. Damn right it does. 20 minutes later, Talia was back on stage, addressing the disruption directly. What you just witnessed was an attempt to intimidate us, to prevent life-saving medicine from reaching patients who need it. But we don't intimidate easily. The people behind this attack represent an industry that profits from suffering. We represent hope. And hope doesn't surrender to fear. The applause was deafening. That evening, media coverage focused not on the disruption, but on Talia's courage. Her willingness to continue despite threats elevated her from CEO to symbol of resistance against corporate corruption. Matthew found her in her office long after everyone else had left. "You should go home. It's been a long day. So should you. But we're both still here." She smiled. Tiredly. "Thank you for keeping me alive, again." "That's the job." "Is it?" "Because it feels like more than a job at this point." Matthew knew what she was suggesting. Over the past 3 months, their professional relationship had developed layers of trust and respect that went beyond employer and employee. He'd shared stories about Riley, about Melissa, about the struggles of single parenthood. Talia had opened up about the loneliness of success, about building an empire at the cost of personal connections. "We should probably not complicate things," he said carefully. "Probably not. But when has either of us ever chosen simple?" She was right. Simple would have been staying in Portland, loading trucks, missing Riley's concerts. Complex had brought them here, to this moment, where two people who'd survived a hijacking together were building something neither had expected. "I should get home to Riley," Matthew said. "She'll want to know you're okay. Tell her I said thank you for sharing her dad with me." As Matthew drove through Boston streets toward his apartment, his phone rang. Riley's number. "Dad, I saw the news. Are you okay? Is Miss Jennings okay?" "We're both fine, baby girl. Everything's okay." "Good, because I invited her to my birthday party next week." She said yes. Matthew almost laughed. Leave it to his 12-year-old daughter to navigate complications with pure simplicity. "That's great, Riley. I'm sure she'll love it." And somehow, he knew she would. 4 years later, Matthew stood in the backyard of their house in Cambridge, watching Riley practice soccer with friends from her high school team. She was 16 now, confident and happy in ways that seemed impossible back in that Portland apartment. The scholarship offers were already coming in from colleges impressed by her academic record and athletic ability. "Your daughter is terrifying," Talia said, appearing beside him with 2 glasses of lemonade. "I just heard her explain quantum mechanics to her physics teacher over the phone." She was correcting him. "She gets that from her mother." Melissa was brilliant too. They'd been married for 2 years now, a quiet ceremony with just Riley, Mrs. Chen, and a few close friends. The media had covered it extensively, of course. Billionaire CEO marries her former security chief. But they'd learned to ignore the noise, to focus on building something real beneath the public scrutiny. Jennings Pharmaceuticals had become the industry standard for ethical drug development. Talia's cancer treatment had saved thousands of lives and earned her recognition that included humanitarian awards and medical honors. But more importantly, she'd built a company culture that prioritized patients over profits. The 3 hijackers from Flight 447 had served reduced sentences in exchange for testimony that brought down an entire network of corporate corruption. Anthony White now ran a nonprofit focused on aviation security reform. Reggie Bishop taught ethics at a business school. Melanie Harper worked in Talia's security division, her tactical skills redirected toward protection instead of threats. "Mom, Dad, watch this," Riley called out. She'd started calling Talia Mom about a year after the wedding. A choice she'd made on her own that had reduced both adults to tears. Riley executed a complex move that left her defender stumbling, then scored a perfect goal. Her friends cheered. "She's going to be amazing," Talia said quietly. "Whatever she chooses to do, she already is amazing." Matthew's phone buzzed. A message from Elijah, who now ran the entire corporate security division. "Threat assessment for the London trip is complete. All clear." Talia saw him checking the message. "Always working," says the woman who was on a conference call about drug trials during breakfast. She laughed. Fair point. Their life wasn't perfect. The demands of running a pharmaceutical empire meant long hours and constant pressure. Security threats still emerged, though nothing as dramatic as the hijacking. Matthew had learned to navigate corporate politics while maintaining the integrity that had earned Talia's trust in the first place. But they'd built something worth protecting. A family that included Riley, Mrs. Chen, even the security team that had become like extended relatives. A home where people showed up for each other. Later that evening, after Riley's friends had left and she'd gone to her room to study, Matthew and Talia sat on their back porch, watching the sunset. "Do you ever think about that day?" Talia asked. "The hijacking? Sometimes. Usually when I'm stressed about something and need perspective on what actually matters. I think about it all the time. How close we came to disaster. How everything could have gone so differently. But it didn't. We made it through. Because of you. Because you stayed calm when everyone else was panicking." Matthew shook his head. "Because everyone made the right choices when it mattered. Anthony and his team choosing to stand down. You offering them a path to redemption instead of just revenge. All of us working together instead of against each other. Still, without you there, I don't know what would have happened. Without me there, you probably would have negotiated your way out anyway. You're good at turning enemies into allies." She smiled. "Is that what I did with you? Turned you from an employee into an ally? You turned me into family." The back door opened and Riley emerged, laptop in hand. "I need help with my college essay. It's about transformative moments. I'm writing about the day we moved to Boston." "What about it?" Matthew asked. "About how scared I was. New city, new school, leaving everything familiar, but how it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to us." She sat between them. "Is that too cheesy?" "Not if it's true," Talia said. "It is true. That day, when you told me about the job offer, I was so angry. I thought you were choosing money over me again. But you weren't. You were choosing a better life for both of us." Matthew felt his throat tighten. "I'm sorry I missed your concert that night. Dad, I'm 16. Let it go. Besides, if you'd been at the concert, you wouldn't have been on that plane. You wouldn't have met Mom. Our whole life would be different." She was right. One broken promise had led to a hijacking, which led to a job offer, which led to this life. Causality was strange that way. "You know what I think?" Riley continued. "I think sometimes the worst moments lead to the best outcomes. Not because the bad things are good, but because they force us to make choices we wouldn't make otherwise." "That's very wise," Talia said. "I have wise parents." Riley stood. "Okay, I'm going to write about that. Thanks for the help." After she'd gone back inside, Matthew and Talia sat in comfortable silence. The sun had set completely now, stars emerging in the darkening sky. "She's right, you know," Talia said. "About worst moments and best outcomes. I spent years building my company in isolation, trusting no one, convinced that strength meant never showing vulnerability. Then someone hijacked my plane and forced me to accept help. To trust people, to realize that I couldn't control everything. And I spent years thinking that being a good father meant sacrificing everything for financial security. That presence didn't matter as much as providing. Then, I almost died before realizing what actually mattered. What matters? This, right here. Family, connection, building something together that's bigger than just surviving." Talia leaned against him. "I love you. I love you too." Inside the house, they could see Riley at the kitchen table, typing furiously on her laptop, probably crafting an essay that would make admissions officers cry. Their daughter, smart and fierce and kind, shaped by struggle but not defined by it. Matthew thought about that exhausted single father in Portland who'd made a choice he regretted, who'd missed a concert for money, who'd ended up on a hijacked plane with no idea his life was about to transform completely. That man would never have believed this was possible. This house, this family, this sense of peace. But here it was, real and solid, and built from the ruins of broken promises and desperate choices. Heroes don't always announce themselves. Sometimes they're just people trying their best, making hard decisions, showing up when it matters. And sometimes, if they're very lucky, they find others doing the same thing. Together, they build something worth protecting. Together, they become more than they could have been alone. Together, they prove that even the worst moments can lead somewhere beautiful, if you're brave enough to keep going. The stars shone above Cambridge, indifferent and eternal. But here on Earth, in this small corner of the universe, a family sat together in the gathering darkness. And that was enough. That was everything. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.